Hi everyone, welcome back to our episode on Incarnation Crosses. This is part 2 of this video, so we're going to jump right back into where we left off. So if you haven't watched part 1, I recommend you go back and watch that. You'll need to have that information in order really to follow along what we're doing here. I'll put a link to it in the description below, and hopefully I'll do that thing where it pops up there too. So without further ado, let's just jump right back in to where we left off. Which was really starting to demonstrate how these incarnation crosses work. And we were looking at this cross of the Sphinx, right? And how it operates through just one gate. We're looking at gate 13, right? The gate of the listener. And this is a gate in the G center. It is a gate on the abstract or sensing circuit. This is all about the experience of listening in order to find direction. And we're going to demonstrate how the profiles work through incarnation. So we're going to see how we can get 12 different expressions of gate 13 based on the position of the sun as it moves through that gate and hits each line, right? And this is a really, it's a fundamental aspect of how profile works. And this is a fundamental aspect of how the human design system works at a very fundamental level. Once you understand, and it was something that was puzzling to me when I first came to it, and it took me a while to work out. We get right angle crosses and left angle crosses and fixed crosses. And, when I found I'm a right angle, what does that mean? Well, here's where we're going to see really where that languaging and nomenclature comes from. It's from this mechanic, and it's based off this really profound calculation of the 88-degree offset between the two calculations, the personality and design. So we're going to see how that mechanically plays out by understanding incarnation crosses and angles. So what I demonstrated was, we'll start here with what we have. If we have a sun, say I call this a new Sphinx soul, right? Coming into the world in gate 13, right? In the early or the mid degrees of Aquarius. This is early February every year. For that week or so, a little less than a week, obviously, the sun moves through gate 13, and it will consecutively move through all 6 lines of gate 13. So if we start with the 13-1 here, we demonstrated how if you go back 88 degrees of the sun before that birth time, you're going to end up with your design sun in gate 1, line 3, right? That's the first position where it could be 88 degrees apart. And this mechanic is really fascinating, and it's really fundamental to grok, right? As Ra would always say, it's something to really grasp, right? I love it when he says that. But this is something to really grasp about how this mechanic works. So what this gives us is we have a personality Sun-Earth in 13 line 1 and the design Sun-Earth in gate 1 line 3. And this would give us what we would call the 1-3 profile. And we've been showing how, we used this graphic in our episode on profile. And as I said, we really focused more on the meaning and symbolism of this, fraction, or you will, this one number over the second as being our identity and our nature based on the line that our personality Sun-Earth is in and the line that our design Sun-Earth is in. And so here with this soul that we're demonstrating is coming in on the right angle cross of the Sphinx in gate 13, and they're coming in as a 1-3 profile, which we call the investigator martyr. So now we're going to get a very distinct flavor, if you will. There's 12 different flavors, as we'll see as we progress through each and every gate, and technically each and every cross, because it's going to bring a different aspect and line signification for each of the gates, or the 4 gates of the cross that it's coming in on. And a reminder how we're orienting ourselves to, the first 3 lines being of a lower trigram and have a personal orientation, the upper 3 being transpersonal, And, as we give this example of the 1-3, this is kind of a unique profile wherein both of the lines, both the personality and design, the conscious and unconscious, are both lower trigram. This is a very, very personal, subjective type of profile. People coming in as investigator martyrs, they are really self-absorbed by design. That is not a criticism, right? That is actually their role. This is the role of the investigator martyr, to just dig in, introspect, find out what's going on at the foundational level, and then their third line unconscious saying, it doesn't work, we need a new foundation here, and that's the role that they provide in humanity, in the world. So to all you 1-3s out there, thanks for doing all the hard work, right? So yeah, we're going to go through all these profiles, and I've put in here, I remember, I do like to use some of the other language in case you don't like being an investigator martyr. Well, how about we call you a confident change agent? And that's what these people are, right? They get the confidence from getting to the solid foundation, and then that trial and error process of their third line makes them change agents. It gives them the ability to say, this doesn't work, but I figured out how it does work. And this is the gift of the 1-3. We could call this the archetype of the hero if we wanted to. But using the good old-fashioned traditional HD language, investigator martyrs. So if we go back to our graph here and think about what that means. So this is the beauty of keynoting in human design, because we can take keynotes for each of these factors, and when we string them together, we get a really precise insight into what the character is, of this soul, of someone who's working, say, the right angle cross of the Sphinx coming in gate 13 as a 1-3. So let's really break that down and see what we can discern. I think we did a little of this, but I want to just reset so that we have a starting point here. So what do we get? So first of all, every of the lines, so gate 13 as a whole has a keynote, right? And this is the gate of the listener, right? This is the experience of listening, and particularly because it's on, remember, it's on the sensing circuit. The sensing circuit is focused on the past. It is focusing on having experiences. It's that abstract process. This soul, this 1-3, or all of the souls coming in on the 13 here, are listening. They're listening for the stories. They're listening for the experiences of the past, their own past. They're reviewing their own past. They're listening to the past of others. These are people who probably make excellent historians, right? And storytellers in a way, particularly if they have the 33 connected in their design, right? They have that whole channel. But in general, when we look at this 13-1, now we can add the first line keynote, which here is empathy, right? And this is another interesting thing, is you start to put these pieces together and learn how the keynotes of every gate works. We saw how empathy was one of the characteristics of a first line, right? And now here we're seeing why. Where does that come from? Well, the first line of gate 13, and remember all of these gates from the G center, or most of them, I think 4 of them you could say, are what we would call role gates. Because this is the G center. This is the behavior of the self. This is the spirit of the self. This is the determination of the self, the direction of the self, the creative self-expression of the self, right? This is the 10 and the 25 and the 1 and the 2. And, here the 13 has, and the 7 all have roles. They define how we play our role in life. So it's really interesting to know how, once you learn all this, a lot of the complexity of human design, and it can seem very complex at sort of that 30,000 foot view as you look at all the information, but then you start to see how all these pieces fit together, and it really simplifies it and reveals that true elegance, right? Simple, beautiful, profound, ingenious system that we're working with. So that's a cool way of breaking this down. It's a 1-13-1, right? So empathy. So not only are they listening, They're listening with a sense of empathy. These are, ideally very empathetic creatures. They're empathetic to the past. They're empathetic to, really deeply listening to the other. And of course, the other keynote we had, we're coming from the quarter of initiation, so this is purpose fulfilled through mind. So they're going to express that empathy and that keen listening through ability to use their mind, through their thoughts, through their ideas. And if they have, throat definition, probably through an expression of sharing that information, that discovery, that empathy. So this is the role of this soul would be to really listen and listen to others and listen with compassion or with empathy. And of course, all of these have detriments, and we could say, or not, right? You could get a soul that just doesn't listen, right? So that's an interesting way of looking at it. But now here's where we're going to see how the mechanic of this works, because essentially this is a snapshot in time. This was the moment a soul was born, and at that time, and for that few hours in that day, this was the profile. It was Sun in the 13.1, design Sun in the 1.3. But of course, time keeps ticking on, and I'm going to demonstrate that if you look. So basically, in a few hours later in that day, or maybe the next day, tick tock, tick tock. Eventually, while the Sun is still in line 1, the 88 degree point will move from line 3 to line 4 over here on the design side. So what happens? Now we've got a 4th line design while still having a 1st line personality. So someone born hours later that day is going to have a different profile. What are they going to have? Now we've still got the investigator consciously, but unconsciously, this is going to be an opportunist. This is a line 4, operating differently than a 3rd line, the martyr, a totally different profile. So that's really fascinating. So now we can think about, while this keynoting would stay the same for the Sun, we would then go back and look at a different keynote for gate 1. So whereas when it was in the 3rd line, this is the keynote of energy to sustain creative work, right? That 3rd line martyr just keeping at it, trial and error. In our first example, now we move to a 4th line. And this is the keynote of aloneness as a medium of creativity, right? And so this is interesting, and I've always thought this is a very difficult keynote to sort of penetrate in some ways, because when we think about line 4, the opportunist, this is someone that's going to really have to externalize what they investigate, right? They're going to investigate, and then they're going to externalize. They're going to share. So they are going to listen, and what they find and discover through their listening, then they're going to use that 4th line capacity to externalize, to share, to promote it, to say, hey, look what I found, right? And they're going to share it with their friends. They're going to share it with their communities. They're going to share it with anyone who will listen. So it's really fascinating, right? So we get a different, and of course, all 4 of the arms change accordingly. So we're going to get a different expression over here in gate 2, line 4, because they both move in synchrony here. So hopefully you're starting to see what's going on. But of course, this only lasts for a few hours, and then, tick tock, tick tock. But now you see what happens by the mechanics here. At some point, the Sun will move out of line 1 and into line 2 of gate 13. And it will do this before that 88 degree offset leaves line 4 of gate 1. So this is really, again, this 88 degree offset is one of the most ingenious sort of mechanics of this whole system, because it really gives us something really profound. This is how, this quantum works, where we take these 2 factors, the personality and the design, these 2 birth times, and we bring them together into the illusion of separateness, as we call it. But this is how it works. And this is why it works. And this is why we have so much differentiation. This is why we're evolving as a species, because of all of these different profiles and forms that we can incarnate into in each lifetime. Trying out a different model of this vehicle. So very cool. But what happens here now is we get the personality has changed. So we get the 2 over the 4. So now if we go back to our graphic here, we can see now we've got the conscious hermit and we've got the opportunist underneath. Totally different expression. So still gate 13, still cross of the Sphinx, still, purpose fulfilled through mind, but now that conscious personality is working and operating as a hermit, if you will, or the natural. And now we get a new keynoting for gate 13, line 2. And that's bigotry, right? And this is another one that, part of that language that I think ruffles a lot of feathers, let's just say. But, if we take this for what it really means, it's that, the line 2 is only going to have a tolerance for a certain amount or certain kind of story, if you will. It's going to be sort of prejudiced in its listening. And that's not, again, these are not moral judgments, right? This is duality. This is this and that. And it's really important to really grok when you're coming to this system for the first time, because I think a lot of people just get offended, right? No one wants to be a bigot. It's like, oh, human design said I was a bigot. Fuck that system. No, it means, let's use a different word. You're discriminating, right? You have, a high sense of discrimination, because that second line, that hermit is only going to focus, is only going to listen for the right thing for it to hear, let's say, right? And it's just a different frequency than a first line would be. The empathy, right? They're going on the second line is very introverted, and it's coming back into its self, and it's like the hermit, right? Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. Let me figure it out for myself. You think about it, the role is the Democrat, right? So it seems, it's democratic. It's very generous. It shares, right? And it does that just because it doesn't want to make the decisions. And here it gets this role of, and this is, I think, we call this the limited perspective. And that's where we get the limited perspective in every role, is from this 13th gate, which is fascinating. So the bigot, if we want to call it that, but it just means discriminating. Let's just say that. So what I'm demonstrating, though, is how you can get, a different way of listening, a different expression of gate 13, right? But of course, tick tock, right? Time moves on. We're probably a day or two later than when we started in the 1-3, but at some point, while the sun is still in the second line, the 88-degree calculation has moved into the 5th line. So now we're getting a 2-5 profile. Now we're getting a hermit heretic. And something to note about these profiles, some are way more common than others. And this also has to do with the way this mechanic works. So what you really understand is that the 1-3, the 2-4, the 3-5, and the 4-6 here in these right angle profiles are way more common than the 1-4 and the 2-5 and the 3-6. And that's just by virtue of how this mechanic works. The sun, that 88 degrees, it just spends, and I apologize, I don't know the exact ratio, but I want to say it's like, almost 80 or 90%, and then 10%, and then 80, it's only a few hours of every day or of every gate of every week where you get these, what we would call more transitional profiles. So more likely, you're going to know a lot more 1-3s or 2-4s or 3-5s or 4-6s. If you're coming in on a 1-4 or a 2-5 or a 3-6, you're going to meet much fewer of those profiles by virtue of this mechanic. So, this is one of those. We don't hear as many hermit heretics as we do martyr heretics, or hermit opportunists. It's what we would call a transitional profile because, this mechanic is only in place for a much shorter period of time. But it does give us a new sort of keynoting to add, right? So now we can look back to this fifth line. The line 5, gate 1, is the energy to attract society, right? So this makes a lot more sense, right? The fifth line heretic is all about universalizing whatever it discovers in that first line. And so it would give this soul the ability to universalize whatever it listens to, right? You could say it universalizes its bigotry or its discrimination about what it's listened to, and will then at some point be projected upon to share what it discovered through that very focused, specialized listening as a hermit, as that natural talent that is really focused on discriminating what is of value to be listened to and bringing that gift and that natural talent to the world. So, I don't know. I find this stuff amazingly fascinating to really contemplate and to grasp and to watch and to observe operating mechanically here. But of course, time never stops, right? Time ticks on, tick tock. So now at some point during this week in February, the day or two later, we see that the sun moves into line 3 of gate 13. And so now we've got ourselves a classic 3-5. We have a martyr heretic, right? Still, and again, we're all working through this right angle. These are all right angle crosses. And we're going to see why that is and how it shifts in a few minutes, and you'll really start to get a sense of how this really works. But now we've changed our personality here. We've gotten our first expression of a third line, right? We have a martyr listener, right? And again, still coming through initiation, still going to be purpose fulfilled through mind, but boy, this is a different way of listening. This is listening to for what doesn't work, right? This is a soul that's going to constantly hear the wrong thing. It's like, that ain't right, right? And it's going to share why it isn't right, right? 3-5. This is a martyr heretic who then will universalize the trial and error process of what it's been listening for its whole life, right? Totally different expression of the exact same gate. And if we look at the keynote for line 3 here in gate 13, well, this is the limited perspective of pessimism. And these are people who could be very pessimistic, right? Because they're constantly finding what doesn't work. They're having trial and error, and they're bumping into things. Things are bumping into them, and they're like, this doesn't work. And that could make someone very pessimistic. And again, there's a healthy pessimism, just like there's like a healthy skepticism. If you're just entirely skeptical and negative, that's one thing, but you could be healthy in your skepticism. On the same turn, you could be healthy in your pessimism. And this is the martyr, or the third line, I think, at its most useful, right? And I'm a 3-5, so I kind of feel like I have a good insight into this. And I always like to, emphasize the trial part of the trial and error duality, right? It's like that willingness to keep trying, despite being pessimistic, despite finding things that don't work. Line 3s will then keep at it. What does work? What does work? Try the next thing. Try the next thing. Very experimental and willing to keep trying. And that's the gift of the 3. So when we look at this example, right, they're going to keep listening. They're not going, once they hear something that doesn't work, they're not going to just be like, I'm not listening anymore. Well, maybe if you're your not self, you might. But those who are following and living their design, they're going to keep their ears open for what does work, right? And then they're going to share it. They're going to externalize it. They're going to universalize it through their fifth line heretic nature. And they'll have the energy to attract the people who have recognized that by this process of trial and error, they've found a good solution. Very cool, right? Very cool. But of course, that's just for a few hours of that week. And tick tock, time ticks on. And before the sun will leave the third line over here in 13, eventually that 88 degrees hits the sixth line over here in gate 1. And so we get another one of these transitional profiles, the 3-6. Like I said, very rare, but we do get some of us in our species here who are playing this role of the martyr role model. Right? And this is a really interesting one because the 3-6, it has a sort of harmonic nature to it. You know, it's the top of the lower trigram paired with the top of the upper trigram. So the martyr role model is a pretty nifty design, if you will. So we're going to stick with this third line keynote here of being pessimistic, but then we're going to add a sixth line keynote to this first gate, and here we get objectivity, right? Very interesting combination here where, you know, not only do they listen for what doesn't work as these martyrs, but they're also going to objectify that. They are going to, you know, do that sixth line thing that we all love our role models for, is they're going to live it. They're going to exemplify that which they've listened for and discovered through their trial and error process. They are going to be administrators of sorts, right? And we're not getting too deep into profile, but you know, this is an interesting one where it's a double 3, right? So they are really going to have some trial and error in that first third of their lives. Boy, are they going to bump into and to hear and to listen to a lot of stuff that doesn't work, right? But by the time they get to that coming off the roof as a 6, boy, are they going to have something really useful to share with society, right? There's a chance to really, you know, help the collective. And sharing is really the key here, right? We're talking about collective circuitry. We're talking about the need to share with the collective that which they've discovered through their mind, purpose fulfilled through mind. All right, so we're kind of coming here to, you know, time ticking on. So as you can see, and you're probably figuring this out by now, right? The sun then moves into the fourth gate over here on the personality side, and we get a much more common role here. We get the profile of the 4-6. We get an opportunist role model. And again, the way the 1-3 that we start with is sort of interesting because it's completely personal. Here we get a personal right angle profile that is built on 2 upper trigram lines, right? The opportunist role model, which makes this a really unique profile, right? This is really the end of the personal process in many ways. The 4-6 is going to bring a very specific perspective to the subjective, personal, lower trigram experience, if you will, because they actually have upper trigram lines in this sort of right angle or personal destiny roles. So what do we get? We're going to get a new keynote here. We're going to get the opportunist over here on the personality side. So now gate 13, line 4, if we were to look at that keynote, the keynote is fatigue, right? And that's an interesting one. Like, if, you know, they just, you know, they get tired of listening. They're constantly listening for the opportunity. They're constantly listening to the others. They're listening in their groups. They're listening in their communities, right? They're focused on listening for the opportunity to externalize, to share the stories from the past that will help the collective, right? learn from the past so that we can move into the future with more awareness. But this idea of fatigue or exhaustion, you can get that with fours, right? They can really burn themselves out, right? Because as we know about line fours, there's only so much capacity for them to really be social. And they're still, this is a right angle profile. This is personal destiny. This is not a transpersonal profile, the 4-6. Shows you some real uniqueness to Incarnation Crosses and profile, really, that, they can get burnt out. They got to know when to socialize and who to socialize with, and then when to come back, right? As we learned with the first line, or the first gate keynote, right, where they had to have that isolation, right? Part of the fourth line experience is to have the social experience so that they can actually reflect on their own process, their own internal process as a personal being. So just fascinating. So anyway, we've got a 4-6 here, and obviously, it's going to externalize, and then it's going to administrate. It's going to become the role model. So again, all coming from the 13th gate, all coming from the quarter of initiation, but we're getting these 12 different variations that uniquely express this incarnation and this 13th gate theme, right? And so you can see the great diversity of possibility here. But what happens? Time ticks on. And here is a real key one, guys. I want to show you this. So while we're in the fourth line here with the sun, at some point, the 88-degree calculation will leave the sixth line of the first gate, and boom, it's going to go to the 43, the first line of the 43. And likewise, boom, we leave the 2 on the design earth here, and we go to the 23. This is a major shift, and this is where we are going to leave the cross of the Sphinx, actually. Because what happens is we move into a new cross when we do this. Here we're coming into the cross of listening. And we're no longer in the 1 and the 2, we're in the 43-23. Still the 13-7, but now we've changed 2 of these gates. And this is what it means to be juxtaposed or fixed, right? And this is the transition into the transpersonal left angles. This is the unique role of the 4-1, what we call the opportunist investigator, right? And as you can see, very rare, 3% of the population will be working this profile. And this is why they're juxtaposed. And this is a fixed fate, because what's happening is they are responsible for taking this personal process and fixing it and making a platform for it so that it can be moved up into this transpersonal process, so that our left angle transpersonal profiles can then externalize it. One of my favorite metaphors is that the right angle profiles are the R&D, the research and development, right? And the left angles are all about the publicity. They're the PR department. They externalize, they universalize, they administrate. And the 4-1 is kind of like this fulcrum that says, okay, all you 7 profiles down here in this hexagram in 13, you've been listening, you've been listening in different ways for different things, all focused on yourself and how things work. The 4-1 uniquely recognizes that and says, okay, I'm going to help bring this to another level, right? So that's what we're going to get with a 4-1. And it's also a very short time where this happens. It's one of the transitionary profiles. So it's only a few hours during that week, really, where we're going to get a 4-1. So what does that do? Well, we're still dealing with an opportunist here over in our gate 13, but now we've changed gates. Now we're dealing with a 43, and unfortunately, one of the mistakes I made, I didn't change the body graph here. I should have moved these lines out of the 1-2 and into the 43-23, because what that would demonstrate is this actually creates definition in the body graph. This creates a channel. This is one of those. There's only 3 polarity gates on the wheel that are also harmonic gates, right? So that means you could have a sun-earth activation or a nodal activation because they're on the opposite sides, and they also create a channel, right? It's the 4323, the 3740, and the 3420 are those 3 gates. So they're very common channels to have, probably the most common activations. And it's just an interesting thing to note and to observe about them. So this is in the ajna here, gate 43. And the first line is patience. Patience, right? So now we have the requirement of a very patient listener. And, just those keynotings are so classic of the 4-1, right? They have to be patient. They're fixed. They're solid, right? There's a rigidity to it, and it requires patience. I often think about the fixed role as being sort of Saturnian in a way. And we always think of them as very solid, very dependable, and they are. Every 4-1 I know, has that characteristic. And here, just the keynoting magically always just seems to suit the situation. It's why as you start to just dig deeper and deeper and pull these layers, man, it blows your blows your socks off, as I say. So keeping with our program here, we can just start to see something very profound happening. And so this is key to understand the mechanics, and we've moved into a new cross, but this is a transitional cross. Only the 4-1, only the fixed fate has this cross of listening, because tick tock, right? We're going to move into a new line here in gate 13. We're going to get a 5-1. And of course, when we do that, now we've got a new cross. This is the cross of masks, right? And I'm gonna just read for you the difference here, just so you know. I'm going to reference, I've talked about this book. It's the definitive book of human design, sort of the 101 book. If you don't have this, if you're really trying to, follow along with all this stuff, it's definitely worth picking up in paperback. And it says retail price is a $50 book. None of their stuff is cheap. But you just get just one, and this is one to get. And so from this, I'm going to give you a description, and maybe I should have done this on all of them, but so for instance, here I'll just read this so you guys can get a sense and see how this changes through these 3 gates. So when we were in the right angle cross of the Sphinx, that first 7 profiles, these were people with an individual direction whose unique way of remembering experiences brings a living, vibrant past into the future, right? And that was, we saw 7 variations of that in many ways. Then when we got to the 4-1 and that fixed cross, or a juxtaposition cross, these are great listeners and secret keepers who often explain themselves and their breakthrough insights best through an art form. Now here you can see how the keynoting is built into the descriptions of the crosses. Because why is the 4-1 that breakthrough insights? Well, that's the 4323, and specifically that's gate 43 and 23 working together, right? 43 in the I Ching is called breakthrough, and in human design we call it insight. So you can see how once you get these keynotes, it really starts to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Now as we're shifting to our transpersonal left angle crosses, we're coming into the cross of masks. And here the description is people whose explanations and insights, which potentially transform, lead, and guide others, work best when given from behind a mask, like a PhD. And this is just really fascinating. So now we're in transpersonal profile with our 5-1, with our heretic investigator. And here, this was Ra's profile, right? So now The purpose is to externalize and universalize, whereas those first right angles are all about the self. They're personal, right? They're all discovering things for themselves. Now the goal is to externalize, to universalize, to administrate. And so, this idea of a mask from which you can share that universalization, right? Share that insight, share that listening, right? I think of the PhD or the psychologist or the analyst or the therapist, right? Great listeners, gate 13, but now they have this fifth line capacity to universalize what they hear, to listen and also to get great insight based on what they hear, because now we're no longer in the one and the two. It's not about creative self-expression and direction. Now it's about insight and sharing and assimilating and verbalizing, expressing, right? Now we've got an active throat gate and we've got a channel. We've got the ajna and the throat hooked up. So just by that mechanics, we can see how each profile and each gate brings a unique expression to each of these gates. Pretty freaking cool, folks. So you can start to just see how this magic of this mechanic really works. And here we're talking about now the 5-1, the heretic investigator. Something also to note, 64% of us are going to be right angle. And this idea, I'll touch on this now because it's something I promised I would. You create karma or you clean karma, right? And again, another sort of trigger word. I think people are really wrapped up in this idea of karma. And to my understanding, I've studied, Vedic philosophy, and karma just means deeds, work. It just means what we do, right? It doesn't necessarily have a connotation of heavy karma or you're paying back karma or a karmic debt. I think those are all more modern interpretations and probably bastardizations of the original intent and meaning of this. And I think one of the things that Ra has always done with his language is really get back to the origin. What does this really mean, right? And so if we look at the right angles, they create the karma because they're living this very personal destiny. Whereas the left angles are cleaning the karma because they are a transpersonal destiny, right? They are universalizing. They are, they're the publicity. They're the promotional department versus the R&D, right? These people are very self-centered, self-focused, self-oriented, where this is a much more transpersonal collective, right? And so they get to sort of clean it up. They get to promote it. They get to share it and universalize it. So there's something really, I think, you could say I don't want to say it's hierarchical because that's another trigger word these days, but there is a developmental process here, if you will, as we move through these profiles. And it doesn't mean, it's being a 5-1 is superior to being a 1-3. It does not mean that. Please do not confound those things. And as you're starting to see, right, this tick, 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 time moves on around this wheel. We have all been in all of these roles, all of these profiles over many, 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 many lifetimes. You've been a 1-3, you've been a 5-1, you've been a 2-4, you've done it all. You've been in gate 13, you've been in gate 1 and 2, you've been all these incarnation crosses, most likely over the course of many, many incarnations. And that's what I love about this system and its way of so precisely articulating this sort of the wheel, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about a wheel, a mandala, right? The wheel of life, the wheel of incarnation. This is what it's all about, folks. This is it. This is what we're doing here, right? This is showing us, here's how you do it. Here's how you play your role. Here's how you fulfill your unique destiny. Do you have a personal destiny? Do you have a fixed fate destiny? Do you have a transpersonal destiny? Are you coming in on the cross of the Sphinx? Are you here to provide direction? Are you coming in on the cross of the vessel of love? Are you here to be an example of how to live, how to be, what role to play, right? Are you coming in on the first quarter of mutation? Are you going to fulfill your purpose through mind? Are you coming in on the quarter of civilization? Are you going to have to build something in the form? Is that your purpose? Are you going to come in on the quarter of duality? Is it all going to be about relationships and bonding? And is that going to be the orientation point of your purpose, right? And it's not to say, you know, as we demonstrated earlier, you get an arm in all of them. But that personality sun is giving us a real, as I said, it's the magnetic north of our personal compass. I really like that metaphor. Hopefully you agree. If you don't, leave me a comment and tell me why I'm wrong about that. Because I am a third line, so I could be very, very wrong about all of this stuff. But in general, I'm finding this to be maybe one of the most useful mechanical insights I've had into this system. And you know, it is complex, and it is the once you start to think about the number of combinations and possibilities, it's mind-boggling, and it gives me a great appreciation, I think, of the program and how it operates. This consciousness program that we're taking part in. It's really something to behold. Yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. This means this is going to be a long-ass video, but I think by now you've come to expect that from me. Everyone's like, make shorter videos. I'm like, yeah, I try, but it doesn't work. This stuff is not, there's no shorthand for this. There's no shortcut. It really takes digging into the details, right? As I showed you in an early episode. I've got the 52.9. I'm all about the details. This is my gift. This is my purpose. So, all right, we're in a 5-1. We're in the upper trigram. We've moved into the cross of masks. We have a different purpose. Still working through initiation though, right? Still fulfilling purpose through mind. So, and here even more mental with that 4323, an easier expression perhaps of listening and then sharing the insight and the breakthrough you might get from this experience. So time marches on, and at some point that 43.1 becomes a 43.2 and a 23.2, of course, those always move together. So we get ourselves another profile. We get a 5.2. Of course, you know, this is a transitional profile. This is one of the more rare ones, but the heretic hermit, right? Interesting how the 2.5 is rare, the hermit heretic, and the 5.2, the heretic hermit. Both of these are much more rare in the population, but valid and useful nonetheless. You don't, again, this has a process. This has a, you know, there's a movement through all of these profiles, right? And it's cyclical versus hierarchical. That's a really maybe a important point to make, right? It's not about moving up the ranks. It's about all of these are part of a wheel. They're part of a cycle that we're constantly moving through, right? And in every gate, this is just gate 13. We go through all of these, and then, you know, we can look at the wheel here, and we know we're going to go into gate 49. We're going to start all over again. I'm going to show you that at the end. So it's just good to appreciate how this process works. So anyway, time ticks on, tick, 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 tick. And what are we going to get here? We get a 6.3, right? So we're getting the last profile, right? We're getting the role model martyr. And like the 3.6, the 6.3 has this nice symmetry to it. But boy, is this I would say this is probably a tough road to hoe, especially for the first third of the life, up to the Saturn return, right? As I think we talked about in profile, that 6 lives life like a 3. So the 6.3 spends the first third of their life as a 3.3. Whew. Wow. You know, if they survive to their Saturn return, and that's the thing that's great about this, is like, man, boy, the 6.3s have it hard, especially if no one knows you're a 6.3, if you're not raised as a 6.3. Now, if you have a child who's a 6.3 and you know this profile and you know all this about them, boy, are you going to raise them differently, right? You're going to give them a lot of rope to make mistakes. You know, trial and error, trial and error. They're going to bump into everything. right? And that's their gift, that's their talent. And if we can keep them alive past their Saturn return, by the time they come off the roof at their Chiron return, as true role models, boy, are they going to be gifts to the world, particularly as we move into a 6-line theme here coming up in 2027. For those who know about that, I'm giving some advanced stuff here, and it's a video I cannot wait to share with you guys about the great background frequency shift we're going to be going through in 2027. But that's a little cart before the horse, but a juicy preview. So essentially, we kind of have gone through now all 12 profiles. We've gone through the entire potential of gate 13, right? And it ends with the 6-3. And of course, time ticks on, tick tock, right? And eventually the sun moves into gate 49. So now we have the 49-4, but we still have the design sun in the 43-23. So we're back to a right angle, right? And you can see how this is where we get the nomenclature. Because once we shift over here into the 43 from the fixed fate and into the transpersonals, you can kind of see essentially this angle has diminished, right? Where we were at more of what we would call a classic, right? I didn't draw that one very well, did I? Let's try that again. What you can see here is where when we were in the 1-2, it was like a right angle. And then once we got to the 43-23, that right angle closes down. And so this is where we get the nomenclature of a left angle cross. Right angle, and then as it moves through and that shift happens in that gate, we get the fixed, and then those become left angles. But now as we move into another gate, we're back to a right angle again. The 49-43 would be closer to a right angle. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's not too much, 10th grade geometry for you. I don't know. I love geometry. Of all the math, geometry is my favorite. Was, is, and always will be. Maybe that's why this stuff really appeals to me. But hopefully you're seeing now what really is going on with these mechanics, right? And I just want to make sure I don't have another slide here. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, we're just into another cross. And now it becomes the cross of explanation, right? So we're still getting some of the keynoting here from the 43-23, but now we've got the 49 down here in the emotional center and in the tribal circuit, and we've got the 4 up here in the ajna as well. So we've got 2 ajna gates, which is probably why we're getting a lot of explanation out of this. And we're also going to get values. We're going to get revolution. We're going to get limitations from that 49, right? It's a whole different orientation. So now we're moving from the gate of the listener to the gate of revolution, right? And we're back to a 1-3 profile. We're starting the process all over again. Back to the foundation, right? Back to the bottom, right? Here's where I want you to see it is cyclical, not hierarchical. It cycles through all of them and then goes back, and cycles through and goes back. And this is incarnation, folks, right? We go around and around and around and around the wheel. Every year, the sun moves through all of these gates and all these lines. And every year, millions and millions of souls incarnate and come in at different points on different crosses. And then every year they leave, and every year we come back around and around and around. This is incarnation, right? So there we have it. Finding your purpose. Purpose fulfilled through these 4 quarters. Purpose fulfilled through these 12 angles. Purpose fulfilled through these 64 gates. Purpose fulfilled through 384 lines. Start to do the math. There's a lot of ways to express your purpose on this life. So hopefully that's giving you a much more powerful insight into your own incarnation cross. You can now go look at your chart and really understand what gate am I coming in on, right? I'm coming in on gate 16. I'm coming in on the gate of enthusiasm and skills. I'm coming in on the quarter of civilization, purpose fulfilled through form. I have to build things. I have to work in the material plane. And this is something that's been a huge lesson for me. I'm an open head, open ajna. I've acted much of my life as if I was quarter of initiation. Everything I wanted to do was mental. I'm a Gemini. I'm an idea guy, you know. And boy, has this changed my my perspective and given me a deeper appreciation of fulfilling purpose through form, of what that really means, of an embodied purpose and nature. And it has just completely changed my perspective. So I'm hoping you will get a similar insight, breakthrough, right? 4843 kind of experience from this. Yeah, look at your chart and then just really start to appreciate it. And feel free to share in the comments any insights you have, any corrections you might have based on what I've shared. Those of you who are out there who have maybe even more knowledge than I do, or you just have the gate of correction in your chart. Either way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Would love to have you, subscribe to the channel if this is information that is helpful to you. Share it if you can. I really want to put this information out there in a way that I can get more people to hear it and see it and experience it and to put it to practical use in their lives, because that's what it's all about. That's why I'm doing all this and spending the time and effort to share this stuff with you. So hope it's valuable. I'm going to keep doing more. I have no idea what the next episode is going to be. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep going in this sort of methodical pattern. I feel like I've given enough foundational information. There's a lot of subjects within the human design system that I'm really enthusiastic about sharing with you. So I may, who knows what's next, but I will keep adding to this playlist over the next days and weeks and months, because I think it's something that needs to be added to the collective, and I guess I'm the one to do it at this time. So, all right. Enough rambling. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for playing along. And until next time, Sat Nam.